Anyway, I'm not. That's not the subject. All right, all right, all right. So welcome everybody. So this is going to be an introduction to ham radio. There, like was talking earlier, there's so much to it that we can't put everything all in one. So what we're going to talk about in this one is, what is a ham radio? Where did it come from? How did it evolve? What does it do? How does it work? What can it do? What can it not do? Uh, the I'm going to answer the biggest question I get: how far will these reach? That is such a loaded question. People don't understand, don't know. Uh, but we will definitely go over that. Um, and then here at the end, I've got the steps and things to go through to get your license, to get your GMRS and things like that. And what I'm hoping to do is maybe a couple months or something, do another class, more like an advanced type ham radio class, get into more stuff, and then maybe even get one of the instructors to come and maybe even do a test, a class, do a quick class, and then do a test where people, if they want to get their ham license. So, but for right now, we're just going to go over the basics. All right, so where did the ham radios come from? So it dates back, to the early 20th century. It originated with the development of wireless telegraphy technology. Uh, so the term ham was first a pejorative term. I cannot spell and read. Uh, Used in professional wired telegraphy during the 19th century. Uh, so the first amateur radio license was issued in 1912, and since then, millions of people around the world have become licensed ham operators. So, real quick, why do they require you to have a license to talk on a walkie-talkie? Uh, One of the biggest reasons why is because with ham radios and with your certain wavelengths, I mean, you can talk to people on the other side of the world, in other countries, China, Australia, all this stuff. Well, when you're doing this, there has to be a certain etiquette and protocol that you use. You can't just be getting on there and, cussing out China because, you got something that was crappy. So they had to put rules and regulations and stuff in place. So, and you've got to understand how it works and how it can affect. I mean, somebody could get on a ham radio and be talking to somebody over in China, and it could actually stir up conflict. So that's some of the reasons why you got to go through the steps and get your license. So the term ham was first. I mean, we just went over this, didn't we? I copied and pasted. The amateur radio community subsequently reclaimed the word as a label of pride. Yeah, so ham was first a derogatory type term for people that didn't know what they were doing, that were just getting into radios. Uh, so, I mean, the history part's kind of cool, but here we go. During World War II, the United States Congress suspended all amateur radio operations, with most of the American amateur radio operators in the armed forces at this time. The U.S. government created the War Emergency Radio Service, which will remain active until 1945. So during the war, they had to cut everybody off from doing the ham radio because it could ensue conflict. We could leak secrets, plans of what we was going to attack, and who was doing what. So ham radio is a big thing, and it can be used for good or bad. After the war, the amateur radio service began operating again, with many ham converting war surplus radios, such as the ARC-5. Oh, I'd love to get a hold of one of them. For amateur use. In 1947, the uppermost 300 kilohertz segments of the world's allocation of the 10-meter band, from 29.700 megahertz to 30 megahertz, was taken away from amateur radio. During the 1950s, hams helped pioneer the use of single sideband modulation for HF voice communication. In 1961, the first orbital amateur radio satellite was launched. So all this, the 300 kilohertz and the 10-meter band, we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Uh, all right. So not much in the history. I don't want to dig too much into that, but so ham radio has been around for a long time. They created uh, the U.S. government, created the ham societies, put rules and regulations uh, to help try to control that. So now, why have a ham radio? Well, why should we, as civilian individual people, have a ham radio? One of the primary reasons having a ham radio is its role in emergency communications. So Helene, prime example. When Helene come through, we actually helped set up a couple of people with ham radios and antennas to go on their side by sides while they go up and look for people. Repeater towers. So individual people own repeater towers. And it was really cool to listen to and participate in. But everybody that has a repeater tower linked all their towers to the same frequencies so that, if you're here, you can talk to somebody up in the mountains easily through the repeaters because everybody was linked together. And they were able to find so many people. For example, they go up, they'd find a guy, that was cut off from everything. They'd find them, and of course, there's no power, no nothing, no communication. So, but they have a sister that lives in Florida, so they would radio back. Okay, this is I'm here with Bob, and he has a sister Sue that lives in Florida, and just needs to let her know that he's okay and stuff. So they would radio that information back down here, to where someone had power and communications, and they would call that person and let them know that their brother or sister or whoever, their loved one, was okay. I mean, it was really cool to listen to on the radio. Um, but for emergency communications, it provides a reliable backup when other means of communication, such as cellular networks or the internet, are down. My personal opinion, if we have a catastrophic event, financial collapse, China attacks the power grid, a nuclear bomb, EMP attack, whatever, your cell phones are not going to work. For everybody listening, rapid radio is a scam. Don't get it for emergency use. It's not going to work because it runs on cell towers. Your satellite phones will work for a little while until that satellite starts to tumble because it doesn't have an uplink from the Earth telling it what to do, how to move, and what to move, and how to avoid stuff and all this. So eventually, your satellite phones is going to quit working, uh, and it's going to go back to old school. It's going to be ham radios uh, talking over the airwaves. My opinion. All right. This is particularly crucial during natural disasters or other emergencies where ham radio operators can assist in coordinating rescue efforts and providing crucial information. Ham radios also offer educational and technical benefits. I mean, just learning how a ham radio works, how signals work, how the frequencies, what frequencies does what, is just a great learning tool. It's good information to have. Just knowing how it works. That way, there, if you have a problem, you know a little bit more about it and you can fix it. I mean, if you're using a 10 meg, if you're on a 10-meter band and you're broadcasting, you're trying to talk to somebody and you're getting fuzz and interference, stuff like that, one of the quickest and easiest things to check is make sure your antenna is the right length because it does matter. Your antenna matters on what frequency you're going to work on. It has to be a certain length. So if that antenna is an inch or two too long, you can actually sit there and trim that off, and boom, you got clear, perfect signal. So just understanding can help you later on. Um, it encourages the development of communication skills and provides opportunities to experiment with radio technologies. Operators can learn about radio waves, communication methods, blah, 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 blah. It's really cool to be sitting there at home and you're sitting there, pinging out and stuff, uh, and you wind up talking to somebody in another country over a radio. It's just it's a cool feeling. All right, so the different types of radio services. So the spectrum of radio waves is this big, and it's broke up into sections, and each section has a purpose and a reason for being used. The FRS, Family Radio Services. Uh, it is a private two-way short distance voice and data communication service for, for facilitating family and group activities. FRS is licensed by rule, meaning an individual license is not required to operate an FRS radio. Uh, Radios provide you comply with, as long as you comply with the rules, provided you comply with the rules. FRS radios are limited to a maximum output of 2 watts of power, and they are operated at 22 specific frequencies within the UHF band, ranges 462, 5625 to 467. All right, so what that means is the walkie-talkies you go and buy at Walmart, Academy, or whatever, those two-way walkie-talkies is part of the FRS services. So it has that FRS is 22 channels. So that walkie-talkie you buy is going to be programmed with one of those 22 frequencies, just one of them. Usually, well, I mean, you can get some that have channel 1, 2, 2, 3, 4 and stuff, but most of them, they're programmed to one frequency in between this range, and they're limited to 2 watts of power. Why do they limit it to 2 watts of power? All right. So, for example, say you're at the beach. You and your family's at the beach, and you got walkie-talkies, and the kids go walk on the beach or something, and you got your walkie-talkies to talk to each other. Well, say there's another family, a mile down there on the beach that has the exact same walkie-talkies on the same frequencies. Well, if you start talking, those people down there would, I mean, if you've got a radio putting out, 10 watts of power, you go talking, well, you're going to be interfering with them. So they limit the output to 2 watts to keep it a short distance. So that way there, you're not interfering with anybody else's communications. That's why they limit that. FRS radios must use only permanently attached antennas, and they are not allowed to be modified. So the little walkie-talkies you buy, you can't take the antenna off. It has to be permanently fixed and stuff, and that's all just part of the rules to keep it to a smaller range. I mean, it makes sense, right? So, the FCC rules and stuff, they don't just put all the rules in place just to, well, the government just wants to control everything you got. Well, we won't go there. But anyway, they do have reasons for why they do some of the stuff they do. This is mainly for short distance communications and not to be interfering with anything else. The service is designed to prevent interference with other radio services, and it includes restrictions on the types of antennas that can be used. Additionally, FRS radios are not permitted to use repeaters or interconnect with telephone systems. All right, any questions? And we'll go over more of this stuff later too. All right, so GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service. This was created a while back. It's been around for a while, but it's designed to allow you. It's kind of like a stepping stone into ham radio. You have to get a license for GMRS, but it uses the same FRS frequencies, but you can use more power, so you can reach out further, and you're allowed to use repeaters with the GMRS. So GMRS, is a licensed radio service regulated by the Federal Commission, the FCC, to operate on frequencies around 462, 467, To operate a GMRS system, an individual must obtain an FCC license, which is valid for a 10-year term and can be renewed within 90 days of the time it expires. Uh, the license is available to individuals who are 18 or older. So you got to be over 18 to get your license, but let's see, and not representative of a foreign government, but one license. The once licensed, family members of the licensee, regardless of age, can operate the GMRS station with the license system. So if you have a family, you got a wife, 2 or 3 kids, or whatever. If you go get your GMRS license, everybody in your immediate family can use the radio under your license. That's kind of a cool feature. So, I mean, you all share the same call sign and stuff, but everybody can use it. And it's a good introduction to your kids into using radio and communications. All right, GMRS users must follow specific rules and regulations outlined in 47 CFR Part 95, Subpart E. Oh my gosh. These rules include the requirements to identify a GMRS station with its FCC assigned call sign at the end of transmission and at least once every 15 minutes during longer transmissions. Those are the same rules that apply to ham radio. So when you get on your ham radio, you can't just say, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" Yeah, I'm having a good day. Da, da, da. You've got to announce your call sign, say who you are, and stuff. And if you're having a long conversation with somebody for like an hour, they ask that you every 15 minutes or so you get on there and repeat your call sign so anybody new listening in will know what's going on, who's talking and stuff like that. Additionally, GMRS stations must not be used for activities that violate federal, state, or local laws, and they must not transmit advertisements, program material associated with television or radio broadcasts or message for hire. So you can't use these radio waves, the GMRS frequency and stuff, to advertise for your business, to promote politics, nothing like that. It's just for communication between individuals. Uh, yeah, yeah. And no messaging for hire. Hey man, we're looking to hire somebody, stuff like that. You can't do that on these frequencies. It's just you just don't do it. All right. So the different licenses for ham radio. So there's 3 classes. First one, technician. This is the easiest one to get and stuff. So technician class license is the entry level license of choice for most new ham radio operators. To earn the technician license requires passing one exam totaling 35 questions. So you've got 35 questions, but they pull those 35 questions from about 300. So you got to study. You can't just think you're going to go in there and study for 35 questions and that's it. You got to study the whole thing, and then they pull from that 300 or so questions into a 35 question test, and it's all random. They have random ones, so you can't just. It's not real simple to get, or it's not simple, as just studying for 35 questions. Uh, so 35 questions on radio, uh, theory, regulations, operating practices. The license gives access to all amateur radio frequencies above 30 megahertz. So if you get your technician license, you can talk on the ham radio, but you're not. You can talk on a lot of the ham radio frequencies, but not all of them. Okay. Uh, let's see, where am I at? Megahertz. Allowing these licensees the ability to communicate locally and most often within North America. It also allows for some limited privileges on the HF frequencies, also called shortwave. Everybody's heard the term shortwave. Bands used for international communications. So your technician license would be the next step after your GMRS. and it gives you GMRS is this much of the spectrum. Getting your technician license gives you this much of the spectrum. Okay. All right. The next one is your general class. So this is the next step up from technician. So general class license grants some operating privileges on all amateur radio bands and all operating modes. These licenses opens the door to worldwide communications. Earning the general class license requires passing another 35 question exam. General class license must also have passed the technician written exam. So you can't just say, okay, hey, I want to go for the expert test and da 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 da. You can't do that. You have to go through each one at a time because a lot of it's repetitive, but in each section, there's more information and stuff that you need to know before you go communicating worldwide. And again, so now you're pulling from about 400 or 500 questions, and they pull 35 out of that. So yeah, it gets progressively more difficult to get. All right, your amateur extra license. This is the highest license that a civilian can get. The amateur extra class license covers all available U.S. amateur radio operating privileges on all bands and all modes. Earning the license is more difficult. It requires passing a thorough 50 question exam. Extra class license must also have passed all previous license classes written examinations. All right, any questions about the licensing part? All right. Uh, Rules. So we'll just go over the rules. In the United States, amateur radios is governed by the FCC. Okay, under Title 47 of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, specifically Part 97, which outlines the rules and regulations for the amateur radio services. These regulations require that all transmissions on amateur radio frequencies be conducted by a licensed operator, and they cover various aspects of operating, including frequency use, power limits, and prohibited activities. All right. So, license requirements to operate a ham radio, you must have your FCC license. The license is granted for a period of 10 years, like the GMRS. So your license, your call sign, and everything's good for 10 years. And you can renew it without a re-exam within a 2-year grace period. So if your license runs out in 10 years, you've got a 2-year grace period to reissue your license without having to go through the exam. If you wait 3 years, guess what? You got to go take the test again. All right. Prohibited activities. Now, here's where we get into things that you're not supposed to do. The FCC prohibits the use of obscure or indecent language. You can't be on there just cussing somebody out up one side, down the other. You can't be on there talking, you know, love making or anything like that there. It's just inappropriate. Don't need to be doing it. I mean, common sense here. Harmful or willful interference. So, say you two guys are talking back and forth on the radio. I can't get in there. Hey, man, yeah, Bob sucks. He's just a butt. Don't be talking to him. You don't do stuff like that. I hear it on the radio, but you're not supposed to do it. And don't be interfering. Some people get upset at somebody, and they'll actually turn their power up and just push the key and interfere with their broadcast that they're trying to have with somebody else. It's just rude. Um, you can't retransmission of commercial broadcasts, so you can't be like uh, recording music and then broadcasting it over the radio waves, over the ham radio waves frequencies. Um, like musical transmissions. Additionally, the use of secret codes and chirpers is not allowed. I can see that, but I can't see it too. I mean, if you two want to have a private conversation, you know, but you can go to other places and do things like that there too. But yeah, you're not supposed to use any kind of secret codes uh, or chirpers, that chirp out code and stuff like that. Now you're allowed to use Morse code because Morse code is nationally recognized, as communication type, but you can't have like your own secret set of dits and dahs. So station identification. Ham radio operators must identify with their station with an FCC issued call sign every 10 minutes and at the end of any communication. This identification must be in English or by Morse code. So now I know a couple of ham operators. They actually have in their little Baofeng programmed in um, Morse code, dits and dahs for their call sign, and they just, as soon as they get done talking, it beep 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 types everything out for them. So that's kind of cool and stuff. But yeah, you have to give your identification uh, for talking. All right, control operator was, the different facets here. A control operator who is a licensed ham radio operator must be present to control the station. The control operator's license classes determines the privilege of the station. So whether you're a technician or an extra, whatever, that license is what gives you that privilege of what you're doing. Now, what this means, a control operator must be present to control the station. What that means is you can't have a little base station at home and then put on some kind of recording or something or some kind of automated thing to go on every minute and broadcast something. And then you walk away and stuff. You've got to be present at your radio to operate it. If you're not there, then you can't be broadcasting anything automatically or remotely or anything like that. You have to be present at the radio. Uh, any questions on anything so far? Is everything making sense? All right, frequency use. Ham radio operators can use frequencies in specified bands, and they are generally allowed to use up to 1,500 watts of RF output power. However, specific bands may have different power limits. So again, you're in this spectrum, and kind of back to the FRS, is limited to 2 watts. Well, certain frequencies, certain bands, they limit the power that you can and can't use. But most of them, you can use up to 1,500 watts. But then there's some of them that, like the GMRS or the FRS, he ain't allowed to use no 1,500 watts. International regulations. While the FCC regulations apply in the United States, amateur radio regulations vary by country. The International Telecommunication Union, ITU, oversees the global allocation of frequencies for amateur radios. So the ITU, you might see that. Yeah, you'll see that if you go to get your ham license or whatever, and you get the book and stuff. You'll see ITU in there, and they kind of control the worldwide part of it. Okay, now we're gonna get into the good stuff. We went over all the. All right, let's get into some real stuff here. Radio waves. All right. In radio communication, information is encoded onto radio waves through a process called modulation. All right, we're going to get into some technical terms and stuff like that, but I'll try to keep it down to earth as much as possible. All right, 2 main types of modulations is amplitude modulation, AM, and frequency modulation, FM. Okay, everybody knows AM, FM. All right, so in AM, the amplitude of the carrier wave is varied in accordance with the informational signal, while in FM, the frequency of the carrier wave is varied. Okay, so like I said, well, right here, so a frequency, there's a carrier signal. So whenever you change your radio to, 467.5625, okay, That is the carrier signal. That's the wavelength that you've got your radio set to. Okay. In AM, you like my little squiggly lines? In AM, you're actually changing the modulation of it. So, you've got your wave, right? Because, radio waves, they travel like that there. All right. In AM, you're actually, right here, you're talking, and then here you're not talking. And then here you start talking again, and then here you stop talking. So it changes the carrier wave carries the signal, and you're changing the amplitude of that carrier wave. Does that make sense? All right. And then in FM, you've got your little wave. All right, same frequency, but here we're not changing the amplitude of it. We're actually going to change the frequency of it. So if we put this in a straight line, it would be like this, like that. So it's kind of tough. Here you're actually changing the wave. Here you're um, the everything's closer together and then gets further apart when you're quiet, and it changes back to your regular frequency. And then when you talk, it changes the frequency of that carrier signal. Does that make sense? I'm no expert and I'm no professor, so explaining this stuff, I understand it and I know it in my head. All right. So transmitting your waves. To transmit information, a transmitter generates a carrier wave, which is a wave at a fixed frequency. That's what we're talking about. When you set your radio to this is the carrier wave, and it's going to go at this frequency, a fixed frequency and amplitude. All right. The informational signal is then modulated onto that carrier wave. So like I said, you've got the wave, and you're changing properties of that wave. You're piggybacking onto that carrier wave to send your information. Uh, let's see here. Let's see. Modulation onto the carrier wave, altering either the amplitude or the frequency of it. All right. The modulated signal is then broadcasted through an antenna, which converts the electrical signal into electromagnetic waves that propagate through space. All right, so electricity, I mean, you've heard AC, DC, your AC current versus your DC current. Well, your AC current, is a sine wave like that right there. Same thing. So when you're going through your circuitry of your radio, it's an electrical wave. And then when you hit the antenna and you're putting that out, then you turn into electromagnetic wave. All right, makes sense? Everybody still up here? Hadn't lost anybody yet? All right, receiver, same way in reverse. At the receiver end, the antenna captures the radio waves and converts them back into electrical signals. These signals are then processed through a receiver, which includes a tuner to isolate the desired frequency and a demodulator to extract the original information signal from the carrier wave. The demodulated signal is then amplified and converted into sound or other forms of information such as video or data, depending on the application. So on the receiver side, you're capturing that electromagnetic signal, converting it back into electrical signal, and then you got to demodulate it. So you got to separate the carrier signal from the information. Then you take the information and you amplify that and put it to a speaker. Simple. All right. So digital, I just threw this one in here. So some of the newest technology out, I mean, it's been out for a little while, but being widely adopted is digital radio. The information is encoded as a series of binary digits rather than an analog signal. So, with your AM and FM and stuff, so you're changing the frequency or the modulation of a carrier signal. Here, you're actually putting in ones and zeros. You're putting in bit information, and then it takes those ones and zeros and turns them back into words and letters and stuff. This allows for more precise and robust transmission. The receiver decodes these digital signals and converts them into usable information. So one of the big pluses of going digital is, if you're talking to somebody on the radio, that's what you hear. That's because of a poor signal connection, between your two radios. You're losing stuff in the middle. With digital, you have a whole lot less of that because it receives the information. A one or a zero can travel further or easier to encode into the signal, the carrier wave, than changing the modulation of it or the amplitude. It doesn't take as much power to make a zero or one as it does to say a word in modulation. So all your, police departments and fire departments and stuff, that everybody's going to digital for that reason. You can reach out further and have a weaker signal and still receive the full information. Makes sense? Digital is really good. I mean, it's awesome, but in a disaster situation, I'm kind of still leaning on my old technology. But I just wanted to throw that in there. That's a new way of doing stuff. But we're gonna keep talking about the old way. All right, wavelengths. All right, so we're still talking about the wave. So when we say, uh, you've got different channels, different frequencies to talk on and stuff. I mentioned, if you tuned in, well, here, we'll just read this real fast. Radio waves are a type of electromagnetic radiation, which the longest wavelengths in the electromagnetic spectrum, ranging from thousands of meters to 1 millimeter. So you got everything going from this big all the way up to, 1,000 meters for the wavelength. These waves have frequencies ranging from 3 hertz to 300 gigahertz, all right, making them suitable for various communication purposes such as broadcasting, navigation, and cellular telephony. All right, so you've heard high frequency, and then you've heard of low frequency. Then you've got ultra high frequency, very high frequency, HF, UHF, VHF, all that stuff there. It's all in the wave. So like a high frequency, is real short, or the peaks and valleys are real close together. All right, and then your low frequencies, they're longer. All right, so the benefits here. So with this, when your peaks and valleys are really close together, you can go through walls fairly easy. So this works good for close communications, but it has a short lifespan, so to say. So if you're talking, within, a mile or two or something like that, you use high frequency signals to do that communication. It bounces, goes through walls, stuff like that, a whole lot easier. When you get into your long waves, they can't go through the walls as easy because they're not as close together. So it actually kind of absorbs walls, trees, leaves, buildings, stuff like that. They will actually absorb the lower wavelengths, the further apart they are, because there's more distance in between them to not push through. So when you're at high frequency, I mean, you're sitting there just boom, 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 bombarding, through a wall. with a low frequency, it's just a smooth, gradual thing, and they can't penetrate. So that's kind of an example there of your wavelengths. So high frequencies, your peaks and valleys are real close together. Low frequency, your peaks and valleys are further apart. For me, it took me a while to wrap my head around all this stuff and understand it. So that's why I want to try to kind of go through it. Y'all probably a whole lot smarter than I am and picking up on this a lot faster. So here's kind of a spectrum of the radio waves. So you got VLF, very low frequency, medium frequency, high frequency, very high, ultra high, super high, EHF, uh, extremely high. Took me a second, and then this right here is your radio waves, and then we get into infrared, and then we get into visible light, uh, ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma ray, and cosmic ray. Uh, so it's all part of the electromagnetic spectrum, but this part of it is for broadcasting and carrying signals, and then you get into the infrared and the visible and stuff, but it's all still part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So way down here, you got 10 hertz, and then over here you've got 10 to the power of 10 hertz. So that all goes back to this. So your very high frequency, which is way over here, and then your very low frequencies, which is way over here. So this right here will be like your shortwave radio band, and then you get over here to VHF and UHF. You've heard of that on for your TVs. Any of us old people, you had the VHF UHF button on your TV to flip and stuff, and then super high and extremely high frequencies. But this is kind of the radio spectrum. So radio spectrum goes from 10 hertz to 100 gigahertz. And now we're not, ham radios and stuff like that's not allowed to use all of it. That there's certain parts of each section, just little sections of this section that you're allowed to use because they're used for other things. Of course, you can't use a whole lot of the VHF and UHF because that was used for TV broadcast, radio broadcast, stuff like that. All right. So this is a chart of ham radio frequencies that you're allowed to use and what parts of the frequencies you're allowed to use. Anybody ever seen this chart? Yeah. All right. So I've got a box around here. So the little Baofeng handheld radios usually do your 2 meter and then your 70 centimeter frequencies. So again, your 70 centimeters, your 2 meter. All right. So in your 2 meter band, and 2 meter is literally the height of the wave. So 2 meters is about 6 foot. So from peak to peak will be 6 foot. So that's how tall that wave is going. It's crazy, to think about. We're standing here now, and all these radio waves are going through us that are the same height as us, that are just bombarding all around us. Crazy stuff to think about. But for 2 meter is the 144 megahertz band. All right, so if you see the little white block area right here, that's CW only. That's CW is Morse code. Okay, so they actually section off a small part of it. Your 144.0 to 144.1 can only be used for Morse code. You're not allowed to go on there and talk. But now 44.1 to 148 is allowed to be used for talking and stuff. So yeah, you can see here. So you can use your talking or images. You can actually send images whatnot over those frequencies. All right. So, and then your 70 centimeter, like I said, most of your hand radios just do these two. The ones we have over here are actually tri-band, and they'll do this 1.25 meter. We'll talk about that here in a second. But so your 70 centimeter, if you notice, there's no spot for uh, Morse code. That whole 420 megahertz frequency, 420.0 to 450.0 is used for you can use for communication. Now you can use Morse code in these. That's not a problem, but you can't talk on that one because it's designated just for Morse code communication. Make sense there? All right, so now your 1.25 meter, your 222 megahertz. So from 219.0 to 220 and everything is for digital messaging. So they've actually allocated that for your digital radios. Okay, and then this blank space right here, of course, is for your from 220 to 222 is for your CW, and then from 222 to 225 is for your talking. All right, so now why do I talk about that? Most of your amateur ham radio people and uh, people are just buying, ham radios to have one. Da, 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 they're usually just getting these two right here. Okay, not many people use the 220 megahertz frequency. So if you were buying, just a couple of radios just for your family to communicate on your farm or something and stuff, then and you want the least amount of interference, you go where there's not as many people. So we sell those, kind of for that reason because, like I said, not many people do that. Most of your radios. So the antennas, we talk about antennas. We'll talk about them some more. The antennas that come with your radio, uh, that one antenna will work for 2 meter and 70 centimeter. Okay. If you want to talk on 1.25 meter, you actually have to take that antenna off and put a different antenna on. And most people don't do that. So that's why most of your radios are just these two bands because that one antenna works for both. Uh, and it's just a lot of aggravation. People don't like aggravation. So nobody changes out their antenna so they can talk on a different band. So again, just kind of throwing out there, if you're on your farm, you got your license, and you're just wanting to communicate with your farm hands or whatever, you got 500 acres or something. This works really well. Less interference, less people listening, stuff like that. So on the rest of it, the next step up here is your 6 meter. All right, so now we're getting into some pretty big waves. 6 meters. 1 meter's 3 feet. 2 meters about 6 feet. Now we're up to 6 meters. Now we're getting into the longer distance talking and stuff. So again, 50.0 to 50.1 again and stuff. So that's kind of how to read the chart. We won't go through everything, but you get over here and look, 160 meters. Just imagine, uh, we'll say like this is this right here is 1 mile, 1 mile's distance. You're talking about a wave that is like that. I mean, when you get down here to the others, I mean, your frequency would be like that right there. Just but you're talking about a wave so huge, it goes miles before it ever comes down again. After it goes up to its peak, it's just mind-boggling to think that there's radio waves and frequency stuff that huge out there. It boggles my mind. So these are the waves that bounce off the ionosphere and where you're talking to other countries and stuff. So the short, yeah, the 60 meter, 40 meter, 30, 20, 17. So a lot of uh, ham operators, they kind of operate, you know, yeah, about 60. 60 to here is where your big time ham operators stay. And each one of these, you got to have a different antenna for. So for a 40 meter, well, we'll talk about antennas more here in a minute, but for, could you imagine having a 40-meter tall antenna? That would be one huge antenna. Or even down here, I mean, just a 10 meters. So 10 times, that's 30. I mean, you have to have an antenna, over 30 feet tall just to talk on this band, just to talk at 28 megahertz. It's just, it's wild. It's cool. All right. Any questions about that? All right. Now, LOS, line of sight. Now we're getting into hey man, how far would this radio reach? How far can you talk? All right. Ham radio signals operate under the principle of line of sight. Propagation, especially for very high frequencies, VHF, UHF bands, in line of sight communication, the radio wave travels in a straight line and can only reach as far as the horizon. All right. So you got a round earth. You're standing here. All right. Your other person standing here. If you're on UHF and VHF and you broadcast the signal, that's how it goes. Okay? It goes in a straight line. All right. Let's see here. Where was I at? Travel in a straight line and can only reach as far as the horizon, assuming there are no obstructions. All right. So now, what if you got a tree growing right here? That's an obstruction. All right. However, signals can extend slightly beyond the optical horizon, typically around about 15% or more, due to atmospheric conditions. Under normal conditions, a handheld ham radio can achieve a range of approximately 15 miles or more with a clear line of sight. Okay, so like I said, this is a question I get asked by every single person that comes and looks at a ham radio is, how far will it reach? And I tell everybody, well, that's a loaded question because it depends on where you're talking. If you're in the desert and there ain't nothing there, and this is 15 miles, and you're standing here and somebody's standing here, yeah, you'll be able to talk. But if you're standing, you know, you got mountains here, and you're standing here, and somebody's standing here, and you're wanting to talk, you think you're gonna be able to talk to them? Not very good, if at all. Okay, so that's the biggest thing I want to convey to people. It's all line of sight. I mean, waves travel in a straight line. All right, so just kind of a graph here. So if you're standing right here's your terrain. All right, so somebody standing right here, yeah, you're gonna get good reception. Somebody standing here in the middle of the woods, you're gonna get poor reception. If you're standing up here above the trees, you're going to get good reception. If you're standing over here behind the knoll, the mountain, you're getting no reception. Okay? Line of sight. That's how radio waves work. Same way with the antenna on, the old school TVs with the antennas. You had to get out there and turn your antenna or turn the dial, put the aluminum foil on the rabbit ears, all that good stuff. That's to try to change the properties of the antenna or the direction of it so that you can pick up the signal better or get a taller antenna. All right. So Any questions about line of sight and how far will my radio reach? Repeater towers, however, is a good thing. So a radio repeater tower is a structure that houses a radio repeater, which is an automatic radio relay station designed to extend the range of two-way radio communications. Okay, it's typically located, on a mountain knoll, on top of a building, something like that. So uh, you're in the city, you got buildings everywhere, stuff like that. Well, there's a little repeater tower up here. So now if you're standing over here and everything, that signal will go up, and then that repeater will take that signal, and another person standing here and go down, and then they can hear what you're saying. So repeater towers will pick up your signal, boost it, and send it on out further. So I mean, there's repeater towers, from here all the way up past Tennessee and stuff. And that's why I was talking about, they linked all the repeater towers to the same frequencies. So if you're standing down here, I mean, I was talking to people up in Asheville, clear as day, right? I mean, there's a lot of mountains and a lot of distance between here and Asheville. So, but by hitting the repeaters and everything, you was able to do that long distance communications. Repeater towers are like awesome sauce, but will they be there in a collapse? More than likely not, because it takes power to run a repeater tower. And if we have a power down, grid down type situation, some of the repeater towers, they have battery backups, they have generators, so they may function for a little while, but before long, your repeaters will quit working because there's no power. All right, so yeah, just a little picture there. I get ahead of myself a lot. I don't know if you've noticed. So yeah, you have a repeater tower up on a higher elevation, and you can talk to other people. Uh, so here's one thing that I've got set up. I've actually built my own repeater, my own personal repeater, by using two handheld radios and a cable I make myself. I can hook those two radios together and put them in like a little ammo can. I got them in an ammo can. Got a little solar panel glued on top of there. Got the antenna sticking out. I just made myself a repeater. And what I can do, there's a tower not too far from my house, a radio tower, a cell phone tower. So what I can do is if we have a situation, I can actually go up to the top of that tower, set my personal repeater that I built up there, and then I can talk and listen to people further away, communicate further away. So that's one of the big benefits of repeaters. You got to be able to extend your distance, especially if all you've got is handheld radios. I mean, if you've got a 1,500-watt base station and a 100-foot tower antenna, hey, you're good to go. You don't have to worry about that as much. Uh, but for the average person, that's getting the handheld radios, for emergency situations, just in case, so you can understand, you can listen to what's going on, find out what's happening and what you need to do. Uh, you know, Being able to hit the repeater or being able to talk that way is a good thing. Right? Antennas. Right? This is another big part of it. I can't stress that. Antenna, antenna, antenna. If you've got a little short, dumpy, cheap $5 antenna, you're not going to talk to many people. So, right. So these are the little rubber duckies, cute little rubber ducky antennas. They function. They work. Now, like that, is that a Nagawa antenna? It looks kind of like a Nagawa.
Red tail kind of made their connections a little bit different, so it's actually a red tail, but like a Nagoya.
Yeah. So,
the stock was like this, which is great for UHF.
Right. Yeah.
But when you start going into the VHF 2 meter, you want something that's
right. So that's what we was talking about earlier. Can I borrow you for a minute? So yeah, you can see the size difference of the antenna and stuff, but they both work on the same frequencies. Uh, how is that? I was talking earlier. I mean, to talk on 40 meters, you have to have a 40-meter tall antenna to talk on that. Here these are doing 2 meter and 70 centimeter. Well, 2 meters, like I said, 6 foot. How is that antenna working with a 2 meter tall wave? How is it able to do that? Because your antenna has to match your wavelength, right? All right. So antennas, antennas, antennas. So here, we'll talk about that for a second, real fast. So, what I do with my little marker? There it is. All right. So you've got a 2 meter wave. Okay. So it's 2 meters from here to here. That's 2 meters tall. All right. Well, now if you cut that in half, now you're at 1 meter. Okay. If you cut that in half again, now you're at a quarter meter. You know, and you can sit there and keep cutting that, and now you're down here to 1/16 of a meter. All right. You follow me so far? So you can cut that wave up into sections. So if you look at these antennas, that's that looks like that's probably about 1/16 of a 2 meter wave, or as more like 1/8 or so of a 2 meter wave. So that radio is programmed to look at what we'll say 1/8 meter, 1/8 of a 2 meter wave. Uh, am I losing anybody yet? So so you can have an antenna that's 2 meters tall and pick up a 2 meter signal, or you can have a antenna that's only 1 meter tall and you can pick up half wave, or you can have an antenna that's only 1/8 of a 2 meter length and you're at 1/8 meter wave, or 1/8 wave. So that radio has circuitry built in there to look for 1/8 of that 2 meter wave carrier signal to pick it up. All right. Making sense, kind of? It's a little confusing, but you can't walk around with a handheld radio with a 6 foot tall antenna on it. It's just impractical. So they've created the technology that we can look at, instead of looking for the whole 2 meters, all we need to do is look for 1/8 of that meter of that 2 meter wavelength, and we can pick it up. So that antenna is tuned to pick up 1/8 of that meter. Now your antenna's longer, so that might be like 1/6 of a meter, or 1/5 of the distance of the wavelength. So you're picking up a bigger slice of the 2 meter wave, so you're going to get better reception. Makes sense? So the shorter the antenna, you can tune that antenna and that radio to pick up 1/32 of that wavelength, but it's not going to be very good. The taller your antenna, the better quality your antenna, the better transmit and receive you'll have. Again, like I say, you can't walk around with a 6 foot tall antenna. It's just impractical. So you got to find a good common ground. I actually sell a 18-inch flexible antenna to go with the ham radio, so it's 18 inches tall, so it picks up a bigger, and it's made of just good quality materials inside for picking up that. So now when you get, we was talking about a 40-meter wave, you can't have a 40-meter antenna just to talk on that. So you build antennas that are parts of that wavelength. So now instead of having a 40-meter tall antenna, you can have a 8 meter antenna and pick up part of that frequency. So, but it's got to be tuned just right. I mean, if if 1/8 of this wavelength, we'll say if 1/8 of that, yeah, I should have done all this and did the math before, but we'll say 1/8 of this here is 6 inches. All right, it's going to be 6 inches of the wavelength. Well, your antenna is 6 inches tall, and it has to be tuned just right for that. If your antenna is 6 inches, 6 1/8 inches, it's not going to work right. It has to be an exact number portion of that wavelength. Am I making sense? So, 2 meter, half of 2 meter is 1 meter, half of 1 meter is, half a meter, half of that is 1/4. So, that 1/4 meter. So, how far is 1/4 meter? What's the length of a quarter meter? Uh, I don't know. I'd have to get my little conversion calculator out and to figure that out. But you have to be exactly. So we'll say that's 3.35 inches. Okay, I'm just throwing out numbers. All right. If you cut your antenna to 3.0, it's not going to work. It's not going to work on this frequency because it's not matched. It's not a precise slice of that wavelength. So antenna matters, and you can't just pop any antenna on there and stuff like that and expect better or the same results. Uh, that was kind of a little rabbit trail. So the different types of antennas. Let's see here. Yeah, Ed Fong, man, I tell you that's his daughter there. That's not Ed. All right. So the little rubber ducky antenna. So this is the antenna that comes with your radio. It's a cheaper radio. It's flexible. It's good. It's functional. It works. Okay. It's durable, but it has significantly reduced gain and narrow bandwidth, common for handheld transistors. Okay. So your little rubber duckies is what comes with the radio. I mean, it's like you go to the Ford dealership and you buy a base model car. You get the base model stuff. Okay. Same way with the little rubber ducky antenna. All right. So then you get into the tactical antennas. So you can see it folds up. It's kind of like a tape measure. You can take a tape measure and break it over and stuff. These are the ones I sell over there. Uh, they're longer, but you can break it down and fold it up so it's more compact when you're transporting it. Uh, they're designed to be portable and durable, often used in scenarios requiring quick setup and breakdown. These are great for handheld radios, like the little Baofangs and stuff. Okay. All right. Now we get into more specific antennas. A Yagi antenna. You ever heard of a Yagi antenna? All right. So a Yagi antenna is built in such a way for one frequency in a certain direction. Okay. All right. I told you I was going to get to use my whiteboard today. All right. So you've got you a base station. You've got you an antenna set up here, right? That when you key up and you're actually broadcasting out frequency, the frequency or the energy, the electromagnetic energy coming out is kind of donut shaped. Kind of like that. So you start with little waves, and then they get bigger as they go out. They get bigger and bigger, right? So it's kind of like a donut shape, if you can imagine it. Looking from it on top, like here's your antenna spitting out the energy out. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes out in a circle. So a round antenna, a pole antenna like that they're sticking up, is radiating energy 360 degrees all the way around. All right. A Yagi antenna is built going this way. And if you notice, each part of the Yagi antenna is a different size. So what that does, this is like the reflector. So when you send the electromagnetic energy up through here, you're sending it through this one, and this is a reflector to keep it all going back that way, and it keeps it more like that. So it actually directs the electromagnetic energy in a certain width in a certain direction. Okay, so what this is good for is, you live here and then you live 100 miles away, but you just two just want to talk to each other. You don't care to talk about anybody else or talk to anyone else. You just want to communicate between you two. So you set a Yagi up this way, you set one up this way, and you're going to talk to each other. And the signal's not going to broadcast out in such a way that anybody else can hear it. All right, does that make sense? So right now with that right there, I mean, like I said, your waves are going out like that. So if you're standing here and your buddy's here and your enemy's standing right here, they're going to hear what you're saying with a regular antenna. But now if you got a Yagi set up, you know, you've got your communications extremely narrowed like that, and only your buddy's going to hear you because that signal's not reaching down here where he's at. Makes sense?
Unless he's in the middle of the path.
Right. Now, when he moves up here, yeah, then you're in trouble. But by the time he gets into that zone, he should be eliminated. You can build.
Had it like built it on the top
Right.
of a house
Yes.
or a tree, you could attach that to that.
Yes, absolutely. So again, I mean, antenna is antenna. What kind of antenna you have and how you're using it, or what you're wanting to use it for, depends on what kind of antenna you need to have and build. Uh, so, like I said, this is a Yagi antenna is good for uh, more private conversation between you and someone else because you're directing it.
Kind of unknown fact is, all the news everybody thinks silent.
Right? Yeah, shooting microwaves in this. Yep. Yes, absolutely. And Yagis are good for tracking down FCC rule breakers. Okay. Uh, yeah, fox hunts. So a couple years ago, I'm not going to say names or list anything like that, but there was a local fireman and he got fired. Well, he kept the radio. He went home and kept his radio. Well, he would go home and put his radio up in the window and tape the button. So it's keyed up all the time. And that was messing with communications. And the fire department said, man, we got to do something about this. So they reached out to their local ham group and they did what's called a fox hunt. So you get 3 or 4 people with Yagi antennas and they go out and they're looking for radio waves. So they tune into this frequency so they know exactly what they're looking for and want to be here, we'll say, the bad guy's here. So, and he's within a 50-mile radius or something. So you'll set somebody here, somebody here, somebody here, like this right here. And you sit there, beep, 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 beep. And they wind up triangulating where he's at, and they go to his house. And it was very ugly for him. Very ugly. He got fined like you would not believe from the FCC for doing stuff like that. So rules and regulations are there in place for a reason. And this is why, you get somebody disgruntled and they were actually interfering with emergency services. I mean, what if that was you or your husband laying there having a heart attack and EMS can't, and the police department can't communicate to get an ambulance there to your house because some butt munch is being a butt munch, interfering. So, but yeah, Yagi antennas and stuff are used for that right there for tracking you down. So that being said, when you're using the round antennas and you're broadcasting out like that, you can be tracked. Okay. Going into the tactical side of this, go by the 3x3x3 rule. All right. uh, 3 different channels, 3 different frequencies. I mean, you can expand this to whatever you want, but kind of the general rule, 3 different frequencies. So you've got 3 different frequencies set up in your radio to communicate with your family if a disaster happens. So 3 different ones, 3 different times, or 3 times for 3 minutes. Oh my gosh, I'm getting lost. All right, 3 locations. Uh, oh my gosh, I can't even remember it now. Now I'm drawing blanks. Um, But what you want to do is you don't want to keep a pattern. So uh, you want to go to your program station one, your frequency one that you have programmed in for your family to talk at 12 o'clock. Well, you talk for about 3 minutes and then you turn your radio off. Okay, 3 different locations. That's it. So you're in a disaster situation, and you're wanting to communicate with your family. So at 12 o'clock, you come out of wherever you're at and you go way over here and you turn your radio on and you talk for 3 minutes. Okay, 3 different locations. So now, and then you turn your radio off and then you go back home or wherever you're staying at. All right. At 3 o'clock, you need to communicate again. So now come over here, turn your radio on, talk for 3 minutes, turn your radio off, go back home. All right. At 6 o'clock, you want to come over here or something. Turn your radio on and talk. So you're constantly moving around to different locations. And at each time, so here you're on frequency, 462. Here you're on frequency, 463, and here you're on 465 or something, a frequency inside those ranges. So you're using different frequencies, different locations, and stuff, and it's extremely hard to track. All right. 99% of the time, if you push that button, if you push the talk button on your radio, you're sending out energy that can be detected. Okay, that's how people are gonna find you. When you key up your mic, they can triangulate your position. Okay. With newer technology, with the military type technology, you don't even have to be transmitting. Your radio being on is generating electromagnetic field. So if you have, the mobs and crooks and criminals and everything that's going to be flooding everywhere is not going to have this technology, but the military will. The military has this technology that if you have your radio turned on, you are, here's your little ham radio, you are emitting RF frequencies with just your radio being turned on. So if it's a government type situation, do not have your radio on unless you're using it. Right? Yeah, yeah. So, but just a little fun fact there. Uh, if we have a civil war or a grid down type situation, the government's going to be somewhat of an issue, but your biggest problem is going to be the individual local people who are coming to take everything you have and kill you and do whatever. Those are the ones you're going to have to worry about, and they are not going to they're not going to have that kind of technology, but they will have ham radios, and they will hear you talking when you transmit.
Digital will cut some of that out.
Digital will cut some of that out if your digital works.
Obviously, whoever you're talking to
has to have the exact same thing.
It's all pre-planned. Like you talk about here, changing the frequencies and location. Whoever's you're talking to has to know.
Right.
All this stuff has to be planned ahead of time.
Right. So what?
You're not going to just turn on that and start talking to whoever you want to communicate with.
Right.
They know at this time what frequency. At this time, frequency.
Right, and that's what you need to do is if it's your family or if it's your mag group or whatever it is, mutually assured group, whether it's your group, whatever, you've got to sit down and go over all this stuff. Okay, and everybody needs to have the same plan set up and stuff. And it's good to also include code words. It said, in the rule, you're not supposed to use secret, cryptic stuff or anything like that. But in this type of situation, uh, your FCC rules don't really apply right now. But have code words and stuff too, because say your group and everybody knows everything, and everybody carries around a piece of paper in their pocket saying, okay, at this hour, this frequency, da 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 da. Well, he just got tuck out, and now the bad guy's got his radio and information. They know exactly when, where, and how to talk to you. So it's good to have code words too, or something like that. So at 12 o'clock, when you go, everybody turns their radios on and goes to talk. It's good to have code words or something like that, so you know who you're talking to and who's listening. So, Alpha Bravo, are you there? Jim Bob, and stuff like that. And that will, if, Ralph doesn't respond with his code, the system has been compromised. Makes sense? So these are things to think about too when you're putting the stuff together. Uh, you got to have a plan. Everybody has to know the plan and understand the plan. You've got to have a way of keeping it secure with codes or something like that, code words or whatever and stuff. So, all right. So Yagi antennas. All right. A J-pole antenna. Heard J-pole antennas? Oh yeah, yeah. Really, really handy dandy technology here. A J-pole antenna offers floor, a low noise floor for good reception and strong signal output for clear transmissions. It let's see. It is considered a medium gain antenna, typically offering around 2.5 to 3 decibels of gain. All right, so we'll pause there for a minute. So if you've got a really good quality material, you're going to build an antenna. So you're using really good quality material and you got it cut exactly right. You can actually increase how much electromagnetic energy it can absorb. All right. So what we mean here, 2.5 or 3 decibel gain, that means that you've built your antenna so good that you can actually grab a weaker signal and it will boost it 2.5, 3 times better. All right, you will gain more for receiving weaker signals. Again, building your antenna, if you're building your antenna, precise measurements, good quality materials is key. If you just throw, like right here, this part of it has to be exactly 2 uh, divided by 2, and this part has to be divisible by 4. And so if you build it exactly for the frequency you're wanting to talk on, that throws it all in there. If you're wanting to talk on the UHF, the 2 meter frequency, you got to build it for 2 meter. It's not going to work well for 1.25 meter or anything like that. It's band specific. But by building a good quality antenna, you can actually gain uh, decibels, which will pick up weaker signals better. The GMRS antenna I have in there, built by Ed Fong, actually gives a 5 decibel gain on GMRS frequencies. I mean, that is like awesome and stuff. So, good quality materials, uh, precise measurements will actually give you gain on your radio for receiving weaker signals. All right. This makes it suitable for handheld radios or situations where. So here, what you could do is you can build you a J pole to hook up to your little Baofeng radio, climb up in a tree, mount it, run your cable down, and just leave it there. And then whenever you want to talk and communicate, go over, connect to your little handheld, and you can communicate, reach further out and stuff. But J poles are, most people build them themselves. How y'all doing? You see here, it's just kind of built out of copper pipe, just good quality copper pipe, built in such a way, soldered together with your coax cable. Uh, like I said, that's one. If you're a beginner, build your own antennas. Learn how they work, how they operate. All right, hey buddy. All right, so you've heard me mention Ed Fong. Anybody here know Ed Fong? I know you do. All right. So my personal experiences with Ed Fong. Uh, Years ago, when I was getting into ham radios, I was searching the internet for antennas and all this other stuff, and I come across this gentleman named Ed Fong. And I was reading on his page, and he's a professor at the University of California. He actually teaches this stuff. Really, really smart man. But just reading through there, if you have any questions, give me a call. I'm like, yeah, right. You're a professor. Yeah. Hello, Ed. He picked up the phone instantly. We talk. We talk. Occasionally, here and there throughout the year. I mean, I'll have a question. I'll call him up. He'll talk to you like a normal person. He'll make you understand, explain it to you. Great guy, man. But he makes, I believe, some of the best antennas, and he hand builds these. He has his students build them, and then they test them and fine tune them, each and every one of them, and stuff. So the cost of them, all that money goes back into his class for building more antennas and teaching and stuff. So if you're looking for some good antennas or whatever, I highly recommend Ed Fong. And we sell them. I bought one of his antennas. It's actually a tri-band. Uh, if you notice, so his antennas are roll-up antennas. All right, who here remembers the old TV antenna wires? You got two metal wires and then the plastic piece in the middle of it. That's what he uses, and it's got the little cutouts in it and stuff. That's the material he uses. He uses high quality. But if you'll unroll it and look at it, you'll notice parts of the wires are cut. Parts of the wire are soldered together with resistors and stuff in there, things like that. That's how he's built and tuned these antennas this way. And you can take that roll-up antenna and put it in a piece of PVC pipe, so you can stand it up and use that as a regular antenna. So I bought his tri-band, and that's what I have set up at my house on my base station. Is his tri-band antenna, like that. All right. Now, so the antennas we've been talking about were mainly for your small handheld radios, your Yagis, your J poles, and things like that. All right, so now we're going to talk about your HF. This is the antennas that you want to use to reach out and talk to people further away. All right. We talked about your antenna being a round pole, sticking up off your radio, things like that. Depending on how you're holding your radio. So again, yeah. So if you're using your radio, keep it straight and parallel. Don't hold it off to the side like this with the antenna going out that, because now up here you're sending out your signal. If you turn that antenna sideways, now you're doing this. So if you're holding your radio like some gangster, holding their gun sideways, hey man, you're not broadcasting very well, and you're not going to receive very well. Keep your radio upright with your antennas vertical to do the signal out better. But is that always the case? All right. So here, remember I was talking about a 2 meter antenna and cutting it in half. So a half wave dipole antenna. All right. Also known as a dipole, consists of two lengths of wires or rods or tubing or whatever, each a quarter wavelength long at a certain frequency. So this is a good picture of one of a dipole antenna. So how it works is this is your coax cable coming from your radio. You have a central point, and then you have two pieces of wire exactly 1/4 wavelength of the frequency you're trying to tune into. Okay, so say you're shooting for 40 meter. All right, so a quarter of that would be 10 meters, right? So you have a piece of wire 10 meters long, and then you have another piece of wire 10 meters long. All right, so that's 1/4 of that wavelength. Combined, that's 1/2 of the wavelength. All right, you with me so far? All right, kind of make a little more sense than me jabbering earlier. All right, so now you've got a wire stretched across that is half the wavelength of the frequency you're trying to pick up. Okay, this antenna is the basic unit for which many complex antennas are constructed. For a dipole, the current is maximum at the center and minimum at the ends, while voltage is minimum at each center and maximum at the ends. All right, current, voltage. Anybody in here electrician? All right, so your current is your amperage and your voltage. Then you got your voltage. 120 volt plug, 10 amp circuit, 15 amp circuit. All right, so that's what we're talking about. So when you build your antenna like this, okay, so here's your coax cable, and you're doing this right here. Your current is, so say you've got a 100-watt system. All right, so you're going to have 100 watts right here, but by the time you get out here to the end of it, you're going to have like 30 watts of power. All right, so the maximum point is right here where you start making that antenna. This will make sense here in a minute. So now you're 30 watts here, and then your voltage. So you're running on batteries, so you got a 12-volt system. So you're going to have, so on your voltage side, it's minimum at the center. So if you're pumping in 12 volts, you're going to have like maybe 6 volts here, but out here you're going to have 12 volts. Okay, all right, kind of keeping up here. It's a little complicated stuff, but I'm trying not to confuse you too much. All right, so when you build your antenna like this, your current is going to decrease, but your voltage is going to increase. So what does that mean? So if you've got a radio wave, coming in and hitting this antenna and stuff, if you've got a real weak signal, this is where the beauty of this is, since your voltage and stuff is higher here, and you're picking up a low, weak, we'll say, maybe it's like maybe 1 volt worth of power coming in. This 12 volts can capture that and everything and carry it down a whole lot easier. So if your wire is pointing this way and the radio wave's coming that way, it will be a lot stronger than if your wire's pointing over here. It's kind of like a Yagi almost as far as the energy goes. I don't want to dig into that too much because, like I said, it gets real complicated, real big equations and stuff. But it's a big benefit building an antenna like this. We'll keep it at that. All right. So now you've got it set, a quarter wave on each side, so it's a half wavelength. So you got to make sure that your radio is set for half wave. And most radios are. They can handle that and stuff, or they're set up to do that. So that's some of the beauties of antennas. So now, I mean, if you're doing, if you're wanting to talk on 40 meter, then you need 20 meters worth of wire, and you can do that. Now, you can actually, like if you got a tree here and a tree here, you can do that. But if you don't, if you just got one tree and then you got field out through here, you can actually do this and then have a ground, not a ground stake, but have an isolator there, and actually have that wire at an angle. So when you get into your higher frequencies and you're wanting to talk across the world, you actually want to build your half wave as all one piece. So you'll actually do your big tree, and you won't have a center point. You'll actually do this, and you'll run that wire all the way down to the ground. So you're talking on 40 meter. So this would be a 20-meter piece of wire. And then you can, like, if you're out in a field, this is great. You need to be in an open area anyway for your signal not to be interrupted by trees. So you can have you a pole that you can stick out, and then run your wire and stuff. And because it's such a large wavelength, that this wire right here will actually resonate all around, just as good as if you had a high frequency uh, antenna right here. Make sense? So by having it at an angle doesn't hurt it on your high frequency. Now, I mean, you can actually move your wire around and you can get better and worse reception, but it doesn't affect it to the point that you're not going to hear anything. It has to be pointed at exactly the right area, like a Yagi. Uh, but dipoles antennas is really great. If you'll notice right here, it says 11.1. Da, da, da. This is stuff we'll get into like in a more advanced class, because you can have an a none, chokes and coils on there for RF frequencies. Yeah. All right. Before we get into all this right here, so if you're wanting to get into your ham and you're wanting to talk to people further out, or if you're wanting to just be able to reach out further to find out more what's going on. If we have a grid down situation, we're in civil war over here in the U.S., it'd probably be a good idea to know what's going on over in China and Japan and Russia and stuff like that. Because since we're down and hurting, perfect time to come and invade and do something, right? So you want to be able to reach out and listen to other places too to find out what their plans are. Is Russia planning to come over here and take over? What's going to happen? So getting into your higher frequencies is a good ideal, and knowing how to build the antennas is a good thing. But that's what I have set up the house. Here's one little neat thing that you can do, and it's all experimental, man. It's all about just playing and experimenting. All right, so here I want to back up a whole bunch, and go back to this band chart right here. Okay. So here's what's really neat with ham radio too that you can do. All right, so you get you a pole. Okay. You want to talk on 40 meter, you got to have at least a 20-meter wire, right? So you got a wire here. All right. So now you're done talking on 40 meter. You want to talk on 20 meter. Well, oh my gosh, now I got to have a 10-meter wire. So before you know it, you're carrying all these wires around everywhere and stuff just to talk on your different bands. Uh, one neat little thing is get the little bullet connectors for electrical connections. The little male and female bullet connectors. What you can do is have this where you got little bullet connectors at all these different lengths. Okay, so this length of wire is for we'll say 20 meters, and then this length of wire is 5 meters, and then 5 meters and 5 meters, whatever. You do your math. So you're on 20, but now you want to talk on 25 meter. Well, you just unplug this here, and now you've got a 25-meter antenna. So all you have to do is carry one piece of wire all connected together, and then you just use that one piece of wire, and depending on what frequency you want to talk on, you just change it. So it cool ways and different things of different ways of doing the same thing. So you're not having to carry around 15 different wires. You can carry around one wire and talk on your different frequencies. Experiment, play around, try it out. And now I'm talking this wire. You can go down here to Lowe's Hardware and buy some 16 gauge wire, a spool of it, probably about $100 or something, but like a 500-foot spool of it. Or you can buy shorter spools of it. And that 16 gauge wire is all you need. Now, this again, we're getting into more advanced stuff, but you need ground. Have anybody heard of ground planes? The ground planes. So you've got So say you got a base station, you're pushing out 100 watts. Well, guess what? You're putting 100 watts of power through that wire. If you walk up and grab that wire while it's keyed up, you're gonna go, ugh. Well, by just resonating energy on the positive, we'll say the positive side, you've got to have a negative side too. So you've actually got to have ground planes and stuff. So these are cut pieces of wire that you put on the ground side of your coax cable to ground out to make this resonate at a better frequency. Like I said, we're getting into more advanced stuff right now, but back to Ed Fong's antenna. So I've got the PVC pipe and a tri-band antenna, and the antenna is inside the pipe. My little coax connector is right here. I've got pieces of copper wire cut, and they actually extend out in the air like that. So I've just, where the coax connector bolts on, you got your little screw holes, and at each screw hole, I've got a ground plane coming out like that. So now, if you drive around and you'll drive around, you'll start looking at antennas, and you'll see an antenna tower, you know, and you'll see just one there. But if you'll notice, you'll see some little pieces coming off the bottom. You'll look and you'll start noticing them now. Those are actually the ground planes for that there to get a better resonant on the frequencies that they're trying on and stuff. But like I say, yeah, that's getting into more advanced stuff, and we'll go over all that in another class. All right. So licensing, what was I say? 12 o'clock. Oh, it's been 2 hours. Oh my God. Okay, I'll hurry up. So your GMRS licensing eligibility to apply for your GMRS license, you must be at least 18 years old, not a representative of a foreign government. We don't need spies and stuff. So once you receive a license, any family member, regardless of age, can operate GMRS. All right. To obtain them, all right, you can't just go and say, okay, I want my GMRS license. No. You got to go through steps. Okay. You've got to obtain the FCC registration number, the FRN. You got to get an FRN number. Okay. So you've got to go to this website and you got to register for an FRN number. Once you get that FRN number, once you've obtained your FRN number, now you can apply for your license. GMRS, you don't have to take a test. The government just wants your money. So the FRN number is free. You can go sign up for that. You'll get an email, and it'll be a big old long number about like this right here. But that's free. To get your GMRS, they want you to pay them $30. You got to supply that FRN number, and then you go to this website and you select ZA General Mobile Radio Services from the drop down, and here you can apply. Pay them your $30. You wait a little bit, and then you'll get an email with your call sign. Okay, makes sense? All right. Now, It's $35 to get your license. It's valid for 10 years, and you can renew between 90 days prior to it expiring. So that's one of the big differences between ham radio and GMRS. Ham radio, you got up to 2 years after it expires. Here, you've got 90 days before. Anybody got concealed carry? Yeah, you better renew your concealed carry before the expiration date. You better have it in process way before, because if not, you don't have your license on the expiration date. You have to go back through the class again. Ask my wife. She let hers go, and she went. Oh, she had to take the class all over again. Missed it by one day. Yep. Oh yeah. So.
Oh, Caldwell don't take another
Wasn't
degree,
too bad.
nothing.
Wasn't too bad, but called the day before just to see. The lady goes, "Well, we have them here sitting on this desk. The sheriff hasn't signed them yet.
Ah,
You
man.
have to wait. You have to wait on your sheriff or whatever."
Right. So, but yeah, so with the GMRS, you got 90 days before it expires to renew it. If not, you got to pay them again. Okay. Here's something I'll tell you. When you go and sign up for your FRN number and you do all this right here, they want your name, they want your address, they want all your information. All right. I don't want to share that. Yeah, I don't really. Yeah. Okay. Anybody heard of a PO box? Okay. Get you a PO box. Okay. And then go on here and put your information for that PO box on there. Keep your name, your address, and your identity separate, because as soon as you sign up for all this right here, your name, your address, and everything about you is put in a database. I can go and look that database up. You can go and look that database up. And what that's for is, um, have you heard of a net, ham radio net? So this is what some groups and stuff do. Uh, it's on Facebook, Catawba Valley General Radio or whatever. It's a little group, and they have a ham radio net and a GMRS net every week. Uh, ham radio is on Friday, GMRS is on Saturday. And what that is, it's a cute little thing, and it helps teach you. I mean, I get why it's there, but at 7 o'clock at night on this frequency, you can call in. Hey, this is a BR549, and I'm, you get the reference, don't you? I'm calling in from Hickory, North Carolina. All right, and somebody's actually sitting there and writing that down. They're writing your call sign down, and that you netted in, uh, net control and stuff. So, hey, this is BR548, and I'm calling in from Black Mountain, and they write it all down. They log it all down, and what that does is that gives them they can get a map up and they can pin out where they're reaching to and who they're talking to. It's kind of a fun thing. It's neat. You see how far you're going out and reaching people and stuff like that. I get that part of it, but I'm not into that. uh, but you can get onto the little nets and you can listen if you're wanting to learn how to talk on ham radio, because I mean it's like CB. You got your own language, and you got to learn it. But it's I recommend going to the nets. You don't necessarily have to call in, but you can go to the nets and listen to how everybody talks. They'll get on there. They'll give their call sign. They'll talk for a minute. Whatever. Then they'll give a call sign, and then when they leave the net, they'll give their call sign. All right, signing out. CW. They got all these terms and stuff. But it's interesting, or it's good to get on there and listen to learn the lingo, because in a bad situation, and you're trying to listen to somebody, you know, okay, say we're like 3 months into a bad situation, no power, no nothing, and you live here in Burke County, and somebody comes across the radio, hey, in Catawba County, hey man, there's a mob of 50 people coming down Interstate 40 headed west right now. You need to know that. So say it's in reverse. Say there's a group coming east. Well, you need to let Catawba County know because they let you know last month that there was a mob coming. You know, you need to share that. You need to know how to talk on the radio and use the right terminology and stuff. Uh, so by going to the nets, it's kind of neat. But anyway, but yeah, back to the nets. So they log that down and then they pin it out, and they can look you up on the FCC database and see your name, your address, everything about you. So if you're being a butt, they can look you up and say, hey, this guy's being a butt, send the FCCs to your house and stuff. So if you're doing this right here and you're wanting to keep a low profile, PO box. Boom. Yeah.
We got an appointment at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Hey,
Sorry.
so thank y'all for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope it
It's
there,
very insightful for me.
there's a lot to it, and I'm not the best teacher by no means. I know it, I understand it, I know how to apply it, but to tell you how to do it, I'm not real good at that. But I hope I broke it down in such a way that you can kind of understand it. It is a learning phase. I mean, you're not going to know everything by going to a class or two. Oh gosh, girl, I'm still learning. I am still learning. There's so much to it, especially on the HF side.